Yes, it's time for our Notre Dame report, and it's my great pleasure to welcome to the programme once again, live from the USA, Len Clark. Len, good to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Declan. I think we're in uncharted waters. I've never talked with you on the Notre Dame report about a Notre Dame team that started a season 0-2, and right now Notre Dame is scrambling and trying to come up with answers because they are not producing on the pitch.
Yesterday's result was like 5 points, which in American football terms is a very, very small margin. Where do you think this game was won and lost?
It was lost in the trenches. Notre Dame did not execute. They did not finish. They turned the ball over. They were a team that did not deserve to win. But let's talk about some of the firsts yesterday. It was the first time Marshall, a mid-major college, and you can't even use that term anymore, a program that comes from a less high-profile conference, for the first time came to Notre Dame Stadium. It was also the first time at Notre Dame Stadium in its 80-year career that two of the head coaches were African Americans, two black coaches for the first time. It was the debut of Notre Dame head coach Marcus Freeman, and also the home debut, the first career start at home, quarterback Tyler Buckner. A little anticipation coming into the game, and Declan, it was an anemic offense. The defense really tried to keep them in there, but it was a better game plan for Marshall. They brought a big fan base. They just played a lot better. And the reason why, because of the new college rules, you have graduate transfers. Notre Dame has had graduate transfers this year and in the past, but about 35 graduate transfers coming from big college programs. Their quarterback came from Texas Tech. You had a couple from Purdue and Florida State. People who have played big-time college football, this was not a new environment to them. They came in with a better mindset, and they defeated Notre Dame 26-21.
Do Marshall have a particularly good academic? Do Marshall have a particularly good academic postgraduate program?
Every university in the United States has a niche where they serve it, and Marshall is a state school in the state of West Virginia that has a very good education program, a media program, a very storied one, and they serve their niche in a regional area. But on the football field, they have a storied program. You might remember the movie called We Are Marshall, a story of the 1970 football team that was killed in a plane crash. One of the worst disasters in all of college athletics or in professional sports or amateur sports.
Yeah, it's up there. It's up there with a couple of. I was going to say it's up there with a couple of equivalent ones in professional soccer. Then in the 1940s, a great Torino team got wiped out in a plane crash, and again, Manchester United in the 1950s would be two classic examples of that. And of course, there was that Brazilian team not so long ago.
Yeah, so this was a program that really had to build up from the ashes, but it's a storied program. You might remember the wide receiver Randy Moss, who went on for an NFL Hall of Fame career with the Minnesota Vikings, and they've had ups and downs over the past couple of years, but now they've got a head coach who coached under Nick Saban in Alabama, who is a great recruiter, who recruited a lot of those graduate players who decided to go to other schools, but he got them to come to Marshall, and it was just an afternoon that Marshall had a better game plan, and they executed. Now, the biggest problem that we see from Notre Dame is the offensive line. We thought this was going to be a strong point for the Fighting Irish coming forward, but with Jared Patterson not playing last week and kind of mixing up that chemistry, they just have not performed, which has led to a running game that's been non-existent. And when your leading rusher is your quarterback, Tyler Buckner, that just shows you that they're not doing their job up front. The wide receivers, Michael Mayer had a big day, but not what we expected in terms of moving the ball up and down the field. And then toward the end of the ball game, Notre Dame had a chance to win this game. They were able to block a punt, but then Tyler Buckner went out with a shoulder injury. They bring Drew Pine, the backup in, who throws an interception. And Notre Dame had 3 interceptions yesterday. And what was a pick six that was really the backbreaker where Marshall took it into the end zone to score really the decisive touchdown. But Notre Dame came back. They had a chance to get the onside kick for Hail Mary at the end of the ball game. That did not happen, and that led Marshall to walk out with a record of 2-0, while Notre Dame drops to 0-2. And for the first time in Notre Dame history, a Notre Dame football coach who has started their career at Notre Dame has started 0-3. Marcus Freeman loses against Oklahoma State in the Fiesta Bowl. They lose against Ohio State, and now Marshall.
This is a very, as you said, I didn't remember an 0-2 start. I've remember a couple of 1-1s, but I don't remember knowing two. This puts the Fighting Irish in a very awkward position. I mean, it's kind of like, I know you got to win all your matches, but it literally is a must-win game next week. It's win or bust now at this stage.
Well, with the two losses, I mean, you could still walk into a very good bowl, but right now you can't worry about the end of the season. You have to worry about what is happening right now and correct it. And some tough questions were asked of Marcus Freeman yesterday, especially by Tim Prister of Irish Illustrated, my colleague who's been on this program, who basically said, Marcus, you do not have experience as a coach. Is that a fact? And Marcus Freeman basically said we have to reevaluate everything, whether it be personnel and positions or coaches and coaching decisions. And so basically everything that you saw in fall camp could be broke up. They need to break it down and build it back up again to kind of find out what is going to work. But a lot of head scratching, a lot of fans very upset, and this is not the season that they expected. So the honeymoon period for Marcus Freeman is over. A lot of people are saying, was he the correct hire? That remains to be seen. But it's coming back from adversity that really shows a test of character. We know that Marcus Freeman is a very passionate individual, and you can see the pain that he is just trying to figure this out. So my speculation is Notre Dame will probably look for some sort of a mentor, whether it's a coach like Hughes or his college coach Jim Tressel, to kind of work with him to get him better prepared. But then another thing, Declan, that I see if you want to do some Monday morning quarterback is Marcus Freeman is, the players love him, and you can see him going up and hugging all the players in the line. Maybe that's kind of the analogy of a coach or a parent trying to be friends with their kids. You can't do it. You need to really show that you're the person in authority that is doing the right things that they need to follow, for example. And I think that might be what he needs to do, is to kind of, you don't need to win the players over. You need them to respect you and to perform the game plan. But if you're friends with them, then that might be an issue.
Yeah, because the more friends you are with the players, it sort of it tends to lessen your authority.
Exactly. You know, you can follow the extra life, but I think that's one of the refreshing things about Marcus Freeman is that he does have that great rapport, and you saw that in the fall camp and the coaches. But in talking to some people who were around the Notre Dame programs in the past, and they had winning programs, the coaches were respected. But you talk to the players that played for Eric Parsegian or Dan Devine or Lou Holt, they'll say, "Hey, it wasn't all fun and games, and sometimes we hated the guy." But we respected him, and he became made us better people. So let's use the analogy of like a military boot camp. You hate it, but once you get out, you really appreciate everything that you learned and how you can use it in life and going forward. But right now, the kumbaya moments are not working, and they need just to kind of reevaluate, because in less than a week now, they've got Cal from the Pac-12 coming into Notre Dame Stadium for the first time in a long time. They haven't played Cal since the early 1970s, and here's another team that is poised to knock off the Fighting Irish and possibly putting them 0-3 to start the season. So
that's the next challenge, and that happen. Is that next weekend, or is this a bye week?
No, it's next weekend at Notre Dame Stadium, and then after that, go back on the road. They'll take on North Carolina down at Chapel Hill, and then the Shamrock Series game, which is going to be in Las Vegas. Again, it's Brigham Young University, BYU, but you can't focus on the games ahead. Cal is the next opponent, so it's going to be a really interesting week. We'll have a chance to talk to Marcus Freeman, the press conference, some of the players on Tuesday night. But last week they had a very good, intense practice, and the players were very confident about going into the game. But something is not translating from practice or training into the game situation. And you've been around a lot of athletic programs. How do you solve that issue? That's the big dilemma right now.
Is it a lack of intensity on game day as opposed to the practices where the guys work hard in the practice and so on, but maybe they just aren't able to take it up the extra notch for game day?
Well, that's a great question. That was asked to Michael Mayer, the All-American tight end, yesterday. He said, hey, in fall camp and in practice, we execute. We do everything right. But when you come out against the opposition, it's just not being able to execute. I don't know if it's the opposition that has studied Notre Dame, looks at their tendencies, or if they're more physical up front. But, there are so many different things, and as you well know, it's chemistry. So maybe moving Jarrett Patterson, who was the center last year, back to that position, that might have some sort of effect. But you're at the point right now that you really can't do trial and error. You should have done that in fall camp.
Yeah.
If you continue to tweak, you're going to not pay attention to certain things. You don't have enough time. And if you do that, something else is going to have to suffer. So I know they're up there right now burning the midnight oil and trying to figure out what they need to do. But the big questions coming out of the game right now is the status of quarterback Tyler Buchner. How serious was that shoulder injury? Now, if you want to take a look at a silver lining in a dark cloud, if Buchner goes out, I think this might have an opportunity for not Drew Pine. I think Drew Pine is a great backup. But Steve Angeli, a freshman who enrolled early at the University of Notre Dame and had a great spring game. He's 6'4". He's a little bit taller. He's like Jack Cohn, the quarterback from last year.
Yeah.
I think if he was given the shot, this might really bring a different look to Notre Dame, and it might be a good one. So look for the silver lining. We do hope that Tyler Buchner is okay because he's a great runner and he can move the ball up and down the field. He has shown that, but right now they haven't done that in the early part of the season.
So, there is a question. I mean, my question is it a situation whereby when the guys get on the field, they're playing the occasion rather than the actual game, if you know what I mean? It's kind of like maybe some of the younger players are a bit like rabbits in headlights. Oh my God, this is college football. This is the big time,
Well, they're at Notre Dame and they've had the game at Ohio State. That should have been alleviated. There are some players that are, doing, but you can expect the freshman mistakes. But I think to answer your question, you really can't look too far ahead. You need to win each play.
Yeah.
And then if you win each play, then that might have an outcome on the game. But you can't go in saying that we need to win the game. You need to win each and every play. That is the goal right now, and that's the problem, is that they're not winning each and every play. They're getting burned. They're not doing something. They're not executing. And that's where it really needs to start, is how can we win each and every play.
And if you look at the points conceded, defense seems to be doing its job.
Defense looked very good, but here's an issue. Marshall was trailing. They had the ball at their own 6-yard line, and they engineer a 94-yard scoring drive and taking a lot of time off the clock. That put Marshall ahead, and then Notre Dame was back on their heels. They throw that interception. That was a pick six, returned for a touchdown. That was the ball game right there. So Notre Dame was in it. They had come back. It was going to be an ugly win, but winning is tough, and a win is a win. But when you turn the ball over and you allow a 96-yard drive, the defense just had a letdown. Now, they did have some periods where they did look good. Taking a look at the tackles, Howard Cross III was the leading tackler with 11. And then our favorite player, J.D. Bertrand, with another big game, 9 tackles, 1 for a loss. And so he did his job. But just as that letdown, they gave up that big drive that took a lot of time off the clock. Then the turnover, that was the difference in the game.
So a lot of work to do on the practice field between now and next weekend.
A lot of work. And I don't know where they start. That's why these coaches get paid the big salaries they do in the United States, that they have to, as Marcus Freeman said, challenge everything they do. But when you challenge everything, once again, it takes a lot of time away from things that you should be doing right now, and that's preparation for Cal. Don't know much about Cal coming in. We do know that they know Notre Dame is a team that is hurt, like a boxer on the rope. You're going to go and look for the knockout punch. How does Notre Dame counter? You need to keep punching.
Are there any guys that were hurt and not available this weekend that might be available to the head coach for next weekend? What's the...
Well, the big question is quarterback Tyler Buchner. That was the main one.
Yeah.
Of course, players are going to be dinged up. They'll go in for treatment today, and it's an off day for them, but they go in and try to ice down or take care of those little nagging things so they don't become big issues. But fortunately, Notre Dame has been pretty much healthy, and players are coming back and getting back to 100%. But when your starting quarterback, your leader, goes down with an injury, we don't know the extent of it. We will know tomorrow formally of what the status is. But as you well know, the coaches are not going to really give a lot of information. because that's just going to keep the opposition guessing. Is Tyler Buckner going to play? And if he doesn't, that means Cal's going to prepare all week against a Tyler Buckner offense, and they'll not see a Drew Pine or a Steve Angeli. So it's a little psychological warfare that goes on. We just kind of take bits and pieces of information that we get. We hope he's okay, but we know that there's a plan B and C going forward.
And how have Cal started their season?
As I said, I really haven't focused. I'm focused on Marshall this past week, and I dedicated my whole time. I'll have to go back and take a look, and my game prep will begin this when we get off the phone. Start taking a look at what their tendencies are and try to get a game plan for what we can expect from Cal. But we do know that it's going to be a tough game. Every game at Notre Dame Stadium is going to be tough. A win over Notre Dame is going to get national attention and put your program on the map. Cal has a storied program, playing in the Pac-12 conference with the likes of USC and UCLA and the schools like that. They're going to come in with a chance to win a game, and maybe that translates into recruiting and just puts their program back on the map. But another thing, the intangibles of losing. Will this hurt Notre Dame in terms of recruiting? Will there be some decommits? People who pledge that they're going to play at Notre Dame, but then they don't like the way that things are going, they might rescind their scholarship offers. So winning is great. Losing has its effects.
Yeah, as you say, there's consequences for everything that happens. But a couple more W's could change the picture around in the polar opposite direction.
As I tell people who contact me after the game, what are my thoughts? It's like, hey, it's better to lose early in the season as opposed to later. There's still time to correct some of the deficiencies. If you correct that, then you can finish on a high note and get into a big bowl game. Not win a national championship right now, but you can start that preparation for a national championship down the road. Losing at the end of the season means that something's happened and the wheels fell off of something that started good and then went bad. But we'll see. We'll get an idea of this coaching staff and what adjustments they can make, but it's always reacting to change. And as you know, in college football or any sport, anything can happen with the human dynamic.
Because unlike the pro game, I mean, you more or less have your roster. This is what you're going to have now for the rest of the scholastic year. And, you got to work with what you got.
Exactly. It's not, you can't trade for a better player or trade for an area that you need to reinforce. You have so many players on scholarship. You can only have 85 on scholarship. You can only dress 65 for a game. And you just kind of have to look at that depth chart and anticipate if somebody goes down, who's going to step up. And so it's just a revolving, situation where you always have to be a couple of steps ahead. It's like playing chess blindfolded.
It gets back to that issue that we always talk about, particularly in the warm-up to seasons, about the importance of recruitment. Because you don't just have to recruit the first guy. You got to recruit backup 1, backup 2, and backup 3 in certain positions.
Yeah, exactly. You have to, fill the void that's been graduated or looking at potential injuries down the line. But, Notre Dame has got the best athletes out there. And the question is, you've got all this talent, how come they're not competing? And a couple of examples yesterday, Notre Dame just could not move the football. On 4th and down, you only have 4 downs to keep the ball and the possession going.
Yeah.
Notre Dame twice in the game had a 4th and 1, and they could not get the first down. It turned the ball over to Marshall. That just took the wind out of the sails and also had us scratching our heads saying, they can't run the ball. If you can't run the ball, you can't control the clock. If you can't control the clock, you're going to lose the game. And that's exactly what happened.
Well, it's almost miraculous. The margin was only 5 points.
Well, Marshall came in as a big underdog. So people who took Marshall in that game and bet on it, they walked out very well. But it just shows you in this day and age, college football, the landscape has changed. It's about the talent on the field, and with this graduate transfers, it's almost like mercenaries. You're bringing people in, and a bit of your analogy, it's like almost the pros where you can trade, if you will. So you trade out and you fill that need that you have on your team, and that's what Marshall did, and that helped them win that game yesterday.
Well, the analogy with the pros would be that the graduate players that come in who've played in other colleges, that's like bringing in vets for a pro team, isn't it?
Well, that's what you do with the graduate transfers. They played 4 years, and with COVID, you get an extra 2 years eligibility.
Yeah.
So you've got players that have graduated from a program like a Florida State, and they're looking for another place to play and further their education and go to a school where they might get a different degree or a specialization and take advantage of that. And they come in with this big-time experience, and they help a program like Marshall elevate themselves. And that's what happened yesterday. And so it was a huge win for Marshall. They deserved to win the game. Notre Dame did not. And that's something I thought I would never say on this program, is that we are in uncharted waters. We've never talked about a Notre Dame team losing 2 games in a row. And we'll just see where they go from here.
Just to emphasize the point for our listeners, I mean, a small percentage of the guys we're talking about are going to end up in the NFL. A smaller percentage then who don't end up in the NFL might, if they're lucky, end up in the CFL. For everybody else that's playing in the teams, both or the opposition yesterday, for example, Marshall and Notre Dame, most of the people that were suited up yesterday and were playing in the team will finish their sporting careers in their final year of university. So some of these guys are switching to graduate programs to get a real job in the real world afterwards. So that's part of what's at stake here. Not just the guys who are going to make it to pros, but the guys who are going to have to get a real job in the real world afterwards. And that's why if a college like Marshall has a good graduate program and a good academic record, that could make an attractive place to finish off your college football career.
That's correct. But then when you take a look at players being drafted, Notre Dame's offensive line, which has been a strength where you put a lot of players into the pros, they just couldn't get the job done yesterday. So the players that you talked about trying to further their education and play for the love of the sport are beating the players that are going to eventually go pro and sign these multi-million-dollar contracts. And so you have to really look back and wonder and say, what's going on?
Absolutely. It's an interesting dilemma, and this is how the coaches earn the big bucks, is it not?
That's it, and it's how you respond to adversity, and there's sure a lot of that yesterday, and it kind of overshadows the beautiful day at Notre Dame Stadium yesterday, the home opener for 2022, and they'll have 6 games at home this year, and just when you have an unhappy fan base, it just makes for an unhappy time. So winning solves everything. Losing, a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks pointing the finger, but we'll see how the Irish respond this week as they prepare for Cal.
Well, hopefully the brains trust that looks after the team off the field can get the problem resolved and can produce the sort of performance that we both want to see, and indeed the fan base of the Fighting Irish want to see take place next week. We want to see a W on the board and a more encouraging position and be able to move that ball down the field, because that's the essence of American football. If you can't move the ball down the field, you're toast.
Exactly, and I know what you just said. I think the players and the coaches would like to have the same thing, is walk out with that W, take a little of that pressure off, and then just keep building. So the takeaway from the show today, you need to win each and every play. If you do the right things, expect the right outcome. So right now, Notre Dame is doing something that is now allowing them to win each and every battle, which has an effect on the final score of the game yesterday. Notre Dame losing to first-time opponent Marshall, 26-21.
Well, we're going to leave it there for the moment, Len, and we hope we have better news for the listeners next week. And at this point in the programme, this is where we go. Go Irish.
Go Irish. We'll talk to you next week, Declan.
And that brings the Notre Dame report to a close.